Just past midnight. No warning, just a roar. Then the water arrived. A flash flood surged down from the upper part of the village. A family of 10 had seconds. Seconds to grab their children, seconds to run. Everything else, their shelter, their belongings, the fragile life they had spent a month rebuilding after 45 years as refugees in Pakistan, was gone. In seconds. This is Bahram Jan's family. Logar Province, Afghanistan. April 2026. And what happened to them is not an isolated tragedy. It is one story inside a catastrophe that has now swallowed 22 provinces, killed 189 people, left 9 missing, and injured 253 more, 189 dead in 18 days. And Afghanistan's meteorological department has already forecast more rain for 14 of the country's 34 provinces. The water is coming back. The question is not whether more communities will be hit. The question is how many will survive it. Afghanistan is no stranger to disaster, floods, droughts, earthquakes. The country cycles through catastrophe with a regularity the rest of the world barely registers. But what is unfolding in the spring of 2026 is different in scale, in reach, and in the brutal convergence of forces driving it. The United Nations has identified Afghanistan as one of the most climate-vulnerable nations on Earth. One of the most vulnerable, despite contributing minimally to global greenhouse gas emissions. The country bears almost none of the responsibility for what is happening to it, and yet it absorbs the consequences with devastating regularity. The infrastructure that should protect Afghan communities does not exist. Fragile road networks, damaged irrigation systems, homes built from mud and hope in valleys directly below steep mountain gradients. Environmental degradation has stripped hillsides of the vegetation that once slowed rainfall before it became a weapon. Deforestation, overgrazing, the removal of shrubs. These are not abstract environmental concerns. They are the mechanisms that transform rain into death. And then there is the governance gap. The Taliban's Disaster Management Authority has struggled to mount a coordinated national response. Its response capacity stretched across all 34 provincial branches simultaneously. The Afghan Red Crescent Society exhausted its initial response capacity and formally requested international support by March 30th. Within days, the situation was being flagged as likely to deteriorate, not stabilize. Nearly 22 million Afghans require humanitarian aid. Over 17 million, the majority of them women and children, are already facing acute food insecurity. This disaster did not arrive in a country at peace with adequate reserves. It arrived in a country already on the edge, and the rains kept coming. March 26, 2026. It begins. Heavy and sustained rainfall triggers flash floods across multiple regions of Afghanistan. This is not a single storm. This is a sustained weather event. Weeks of persistent rain hammer a landscape already saturated from a challenging winter. The spring thaw season has arrived, and with it, snowmelt cascades down from mountainous areas, compounding rainfall, driven flooding in every low-lying valley below. March 30th. The situation has already escalated beyond what local responders can contain. Afghan Red Crescent Society field reports confirm a sharp and sustained increase in the number of affected families as previously inaccessible communities begin reporting damage. The Afghan Red Crescent Society formally requests international support. Meteorological forecasts confirm that continued rainfall and snowmelt will further compound flood risks. This date becomes the trigger point for a disaster relief emergency fund operation. International machinery begins to mobilize. But the water does not wait. The floods spread. Kabul, Parwan, Kapisa, Logar, Daikundi, Lagman, Nangarhar, Balkh, Faryab, Jawzjan, Samangan, Saripol, Takhar, Baghlan, Helmand, Uruzgan, Nimroz, Badghiz, Ghor, Herat, Ghazni, Paktika, 22 provinces spanning every major region of the country. Central, East, North, Northeast, South, Southwest, West, Southeast. A nationwide catastrophe unfolding simultaneously across terrain so vast and so mountainous that coordination becomes almost impossible. Early April. The death toll is climbing daily. Taliban authorities report 110 dead and 160 injured. Then the number jumps. 157 dead, 229 injured, 9 missing, with at least 9 more killed in the previous 24 hours alone. Spokesperson Mohammed Yusuf Hamid of the National Disaster Management Authority confirms the cumulative toll includes deaths from floods, landslides, lightning strikes, and collapsing roofs weakened by rain and snow. 372 kilometers of roads have been damaged. 8,526 residential houses completely or partially destroyed. Thousands of acres of farmland gone. 7,504 families impacted at this stage. And the number is still rising. April 13th. Photographers document the devastation in Nangarhar province. The images show a landscape unrecognizable. In the village of Gam Kol, in Kedir district of Daikundi province, Rahman surveys what the water left behind. 8 acres of wheat, vegetables, and crops, buried. The Provincial Agriculture Department records the damage in Kedir district alone. At least 76 hectares of irrigated and rain-fed land destroyed. 3.3 kilometers of irrigation canals damaged. 66 Carez lines gone. 85 water reservoirs. 16 wells. April 14th. Official figures from National Disaster Management Authority, spokesperson Hafiz Mohammad Yusuf Hamad, confirmed the toll has reached 189 dead. In the past 24 hours alone, 10 more killed, 15 more injured. April the 15th. The International Organization for Migration reports it has reached 2,300 families with non-food assistance, including tents. 632 families in the north, 650 in the south, 447 in the west, 560 in the east, 65 in the central region, against 9,000 affected families, against 7,047 homes fully destroyed. The gap between need and response is staggering. The meteorological department issues forecasts. More rain in 14 of Afghanistan's 34 provinces. The disaster is not over. The floods tearing through Afghanistan are not random. They are the product of specific compounding forces. Forces that environmental experts say make this country uniquely, terrifyingly exposed. Topography is the first weapon. Afghanistan is one of the most mountainous countries on Earth. In provinces like Daikundi, steep gradients do not just shape the landscape. They determine how fast water moves through it. The gradient of a channel is directly linked to the speed of water. This is not a minor variable. As slope angle increases, surface runoff accelerates. Water infiltration into the soil decreases. The steeper the land, the faster a rainstorm becomes a flood. And in Daikundi, described by environmental experts as more exposed than other provinces specifically because of its steep gradients, those physics are devastating. Then there is what is no longer on those slopes: vegetation. Vegetation cover plays a critical role in multiple hydrological processes, including evaporation, soil water absorption, and flood control. Remove vegetation, and rainfall that would have been slowed, absorbed, and dispersed instead races across bare ground at full force. In Gam Kol, local resident Rahman identifies one specific driver. Nomadic Kochi herders bring their livestock through the area each year and graze the hillsides bare. Shrubs, grasses, greenery consumed. The result, in Rahman's account, is hillsides that now offer nothing to slow a flood. Then comes the snowmelt. The spring thaw season, when mountain snow melts and runs downhill, coincided directly with the sustained rainfall event that began March 26th. 2 water sources, 1 narrow valley. The combination creates conditions that are particularly hazardous for riverine and valley communities. Communities that had no warning system, no evacuation infrastructure, and no meaningful capacity to respond. And layered beneath all of this is climate change. The United Nations has identified Afghanistan as one of the most climate-vulnerable nations on Earth. The shift in the timing of snowfall is consistent with climate disruption. Brayali, a resident of Panjshir province, described it as unprecedented, with up to 20 centimeters of snow falling at a time of year when heaters are not normally needed. In Daikundi's Sharistan district, Kadam reports snowfall reaching 25 centimeters, destroying apricot, almond, and apple trees that were in their flowering stage. The United Nations Human Settlements Program has already reported that nearly 14,000 people in Afghanistan were affected by flash floods since January 2026 alone. It has emphasized the urgent need for disaster-resilient infrastructure. The science is not subtle. The warnings have been clear. The infrastructure does not exist. Picture building a life twice. Bahram Jan spent 45 years as a refugee in Pakistan, living in cramped brick sheds. Then he returned to his ancestral village in Logar province. He and his family of 10 set up tents just 1 month before the floods came. 1 month. His son Esmatullah had opened a small roadside shop to support the family, a fragile first step toward economic stability. Then, just past midnight, the water came. Floodwaters surged down from the upper part of the village. The family fled in darkness. They saved their children, and they lost everything else. Esmatullah's shop stock was swept away. No humanitarian organization had reached them. They faced the crisis alone. They are not alone in facing it. In total, around 9,000 families have been affected by the floods across Afghanistan. More than 7,047 homes have been fully destroyed. About 18,650 geribs of agricultural land have been lost. Land that, in a country where vast numbers of people depend entirely on farming, represents not just food, but survival. Hundreds of kilometers of roads and numerous water supply networks have been damaged or destroyed. In the village of Gam Kol in Daikundi province, the damage extends beyond the fields. The Kharez systems, ancient underground water channels, are ruined. Paths are impassable. Springs have been destroyed. Local resident Rahman stands amid what was recently green farmland and describes the wheat, the vegetables, the crops, buried. The harvest people had worked toward for months, gone in an instant. Residents in affected areas have issued urgent calls for humanitarian assistance, reporting they have been left without shelter or basic necessities. The International Organization for Migration has reached 2,300 families with non-food items, against 9,000 affected, and against the scale of what has been lost. China donated $100,000 through the Red Cross Society of China, handed over by Bao Shuhi to Afghan Red Crescent Society head Shahabuddin Delawar. It is a gesture of solidarity in the face of a humanitarian gap that no single donation can close. The rains are not done. Afghanistan's meteorological department has forecast continued rainfall for 14 of the country's 34 provinces. The Disaster Relief Emergency Fund operation identified the situation as likely to deteriorate, not stabilize. That assessment was made before the death toll reached 189, before 9,000 families lost their homes and livelihoods, before the spring thaw fully ran its course. The structural conditions that turned rain into catastrophe have not changed. The steep slopes are still bare. The Kharez systems are broken. The roads are gone, 372 kilometers of them damaged, severing the remote communities that need help the most from the responders trying to reach them. The people of Gam Kol, of Logar, of Nangarhar, of 22 provinces. They are waiting, and the gap in governance remains. The Taliban's disaster management institutions, stretched across all 34 provincial branches simultaneously, have struggled to coordinate a response at the scale this disaster demands. The United Nations reports nearly 22 million Afghans need humanitarian assistance. Over 17 million face acute food insecurity. The floods have now destroyed the agricultural land that some of those 17 million depended on to feed themselves. Nearly 14,000 people were affected by Afghan flash floods before March even ended. The number now stands at roughly 9,000 families from this single event alone. Bahram Jan is still waiting for shelter. Esmatullah's shop is still gone. The wheat fields of Gam Kol are still buried. And somewhere above the valleys, more snow is melting, more rain is forming, and 14 provinces are watching the sky. The water does not care how many times Afghanistan has already been hit. 189 dead, 9 missing, 253 injured, 22 provinces, 9,000 families affected, 7,047 homes fully destroyed, 18,650 geribs of agricultural land lost, 372 kilometers of roads damaged, 8,526 residential houses completely or partially destroyed. 76 hectares of irrigated and rain-fed land destroyed in Kadir district alone. 3.3 kilometers of irrigation canals damaged. 66 Carez lines gone. 85 water reservoirs. 16 wells. March 26th, heavy and sustained rainfall triggers flash floods. Weeks of persistent rain hammered a landscape already saturated. The spring thaw season arrived, with snowmelt cascading down from mountainous areas, compounding rainfall-driven flooding. March 30th, the Afghan Red Crescent Society formally requests international support. Meteorological forecasts confirm continued rainfall, and snowmelt will further compound flood risks. Early April, 110 dead, 160 injured. Then 157 dead, 229 injured, 9 missing. Deaths from floods, landslides, lightning strikes, and collapsing roofs weakened by rain and snow. On April 14th, 189 people were dead. In the past 24 hours alone, 10 more were killed and 15 more were injured. On April 15th, the International Organization for Migration reached 2,300 families with non-food assistance, 632 in the north, 650 in the south, 447 in the west, 560 in the east, and 65 in the central region, against 9,000 affected families in total. The Meteorological Department forecast more rain in 14 of 34 provinces. Afghanistan is one of the most vulnerable nations on Earth. Nearly 22 million people require humanitarian aid, and over 17 million are facing acute food insecurity. The majority are women and children. Basic infrastructure is lacking. Fragile road networks, damaged irrigation systems, and homes built from mud sit in valleys below steep mountain gradients. Environmental degradation has stripped hillsides of vegetation through deforestation, overgrazing, and the removal of shrubs. The Taliban Disaster Management Authority was stretched across all 34 provincial branches at once, and it struggled to mount a coordinated national response. In Daikundi, steep gradients make communities more exposed. As slope angle increases, surface runoff accelerates and water infiltration decreases. Vegetation has been removed by nomadic Kochi herders grazing livestock, and hillsides now offer nothing to slow floods. Spring thaw coincided with sustained rainfall beginning on March 26th. 2 water sources flowed into one narrow valley, a particularly hazardous configuration for riverine and valley communities. There was no warning system, no evacuation infrastructure, and no meaningful capacity to respond. In Panjshir, Bryali described up to 20 centimeters of snow at a time of year when heaters are not normally needed. In Daikundi's Shahrastan district, Kadem reported 25 centimeters of snowfall that destroyed apricot, almond, and apple trees in their flowering stage. Bahram Jan had been a refugee in Pakistan for 45 years before returning to his ancestral village in Lojhar province. His family of 10 set up tents 1 month before the floods. His son Esmatullah opened a small roadside shop. Just past midnight, the water came. The family fled and saved the children, but they lost everything. The shop stock was swept away. No humanitarian organization reached them, and the family remains without shelter. In Gam Kol village, Kadir district, Rahman surveys 8 acres of wheat, vegetables, and other crops buried under mud. Carez systems were ruined, paths are impassable, and springs have been destroyed. China donated $100,000 through the Red Cross Society of China, delivered by Bao Shuhi to Afghan Red Crescent Society head Shahabuddin Delawar. The Disaster Relief Emergency Fund operation identified the situation as likely to deteriorate rather than stabilize. Structural conditions remain unchanged. Steep slopes are bare, Carez systems are broken, roads are gone, and 372 kilometers have been damaged, leaving remote communities severed from responders. Bahram Jan is still waiting for shelter. Esmatullah's shop is still gone. The wheat fields of Gam Kol are still buried. More snow is melting and more rain is forming. 14 provinces are watching the sky. The water does not care how many times Afghanistan has already been hit.